It's not about the wins and losses. It's about helping everyone become the best versions of themselves. Everyone's a leader, and you should recognize that. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to act exactly like Ted Lasso, but you have to understand what your strengths are and where your areas of improvement are.
That softer skill of developing a community helped grow the company. And years later now, they're still talking about how that meant something to them, more than just what the product did for their company.
I think being a good leader is knowing your team and how to get the most out of them. And that is doing things like, you know what, I need Thursday off after having this long stretch of work. Cool, no problem. I'm not going to complain about that. You met your deadline. You have to learn how to motivate other people when you have absolutely no authority over them. If you can master that skill, you will be unstoppable in the workplace. What does Ted Lasso, customer service, and software development have in common? According to Marnie Stockman and Nick Coniglio, it's all about leadership. Today, they'll share their tips on leading like Lasso and building a business with heart. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, this is a first for me having two people here at one time. That's going to be exciting. You guys get to decide who answers the questions. How about that?
Perfect. Love it.
Let's talk about leadership as the key theme to your book, Lead It Like Lasso. How did Ted Lasso's leadership style influence your own approach to managing teams?
So we grew and scaled a software company in the same 3 years that Ted Lasso aired. So it was more noticing parallels along the way and then saying, hey, these two things, one of these things is like the other. So it was more noticing parallels than building the company based on Ted Lasso's leadership skills. But after the fact, as we were getting so many questions about how were you successful? And one thing we like to throw out there is we didn't have salespeople. So we grew the company based on customer success and not sales. That when we talked about what that looked and felt like, a good way to answer that question was paralleling it to Ted Lasso.
And I just to add on to that, I'll say I discovered Ted Lasso during the pandemic, right? We had nothing to do. I was watching, just like you, Mike. Everybody says it's about soccer, but it's not about soccer at all. It's about personal development. It's about leadership. But the thing that really struck me, and it was very early on in the series, is Ted state line. It's not about the wins and losses. It's about helping everyone become the best versions of themselves. And I watched that. I've heard that many times before from a person in particular. It was Marnie Stockman. And I was like, Marnie, you have to watch this show. The themes of positivity and vulnerability and authenticity, it's everything that you and I have talked about and discussed throughout our careers, even before starting our company. And it just seems such a great, relatable way to convey the concepts that, at least in our experience, we view as conditions for success, whether you're an individual, an organization, or a team.
Totally makes sense. So this one's for you, Nick. You've been in various leadership roles in the tech industry, from VP of support to managing partner. How have you integrated the lessons from Lead It Like Lasso into your work as a tech leader?
I think I'll say this. Early on in my career, I was promoted into leadership positions probably before I was ready to be promoted into those positions.
Like most people.
And I really defaulted to that traditional leadership approach, command and control, right? Where I spoke and I didn't listen. I was relying on my title. And it took me a while, right? But what I realized is that was going nowhere. I did not get the team moving in the right direction in those early leadership positions. So the whole notion of building trust through vulnerability, ensuring that people are empowered to make their decisions and control the trajectories of where they're going, I think aligns so much with Ted. It aligns with my career path in something that I stumbled over from being a poor leader that then ultimately changed myself into getting little wins here, couple more wins. And again, watching the show, it's thrown right at you with Ted and it's not just Ted Lasso in the show. I think everybody has different leadership styles that really just absolutely resonated with me in a way to convey not only my experience and what I have found to be successful, but what I've seen other people be successful.
So Marnie, you've had a career that's run from education to running a software company. How did your background as a teacher and administrator shape how you lead?
So it's interesting when I give presentations and IT conferences, I'll say I started out as a high school math teacher. So I'm sure you all are wondering why you should listen to me. But I can tell you that I sold pre-calculus to 16-year-olds.
Feeling overwhelmed? Drowning into Deuce? It's time to reclaim your life and transform your leadership. The Decentralized A-Team Handbook gives you the strategies to build a high-performing, autonomous team. Delegate effectively. Communicate with impact. Achieve extraordinary results.
So I know something about sales. I also know something about customer success because there's not a 16-year-old on the planet that's really aiming to buy some pre-calculus. So you have to make it about them and what they want and their goals, which is the exact same way that you grow a company. We talk all the time when it comes to core values and culture, the way you do anything is the way you do everything. So I ran a classroom the same way that we ran the company, with really making it about our clients, raving fans, our number one core value, and then helping our clients and our employees be the best versions of themselves.
I think so many people, they look at leadership and they don't quite equate it to things like being a teacher.
For sure.
And really, I even feel like there's also leading without authority. You have peers, and you have to be a leader within your peer group too. And I think a lot of people miss that part. So it's really good to hear you say that, because how you handle a classroom of 16-year-olds isn't a whole heck of a lot different than how you're handling the employees at a company. Because you're right. You have to make it about them. And that's my number one secret is I call it decentralized management. I basically step back as the leader and I make sure that I have the right people on the bus, in the right seats on the bus. And then I allow them to do the role that they were hired to do.
Yeah.
Too many tech guys, we've risen through the ranks. Like for me, I was a software developer. And so then when you get to the CTO position, you want to have your fingers in the software code. And there's nothing wrong with writing some code as a CTO and staying abreast of what's going on. But my favorite thing is that I'd have a developer team come to me and say, okay, we have to write this thing. How should we do it? Should we do it like this or like this? I don't care how you do it. Write it. It's your task to write it. And when you put it that way, you're letting them be creative and do it their own way. And then people enjoy their job more because, heck, let's be real. If someone's just going to tell you what to do all the time, they probably don't even really need you anymore.
You quoted Jim Collins there with Right People, Right. And Daniel Pink with Drive talks about what drives people, what motivates folks. And it's mastery and autonomy and purpose, and giving them the why, right? And they have the autonomy to do their own work and they have mastery of that. That is what drives folks more than the dollar bill you're paying them.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think that people miss the mark on that a lot of times as leaders, but it's because you come up the ranks, you're not taught how to be a leader. You're just taught how to do your job. And then suddenly we need somebody to run this department. Here, you've been around a long time and you're a really good employee. We're going to make you the leader. Go lead. And you go, what do I do now? And I think that's why a lot of people anyway tend to lean towards micromanagement, because they don't have to figure things out. They just do it themselves. They best not have an employee like me, because I hate to be micromanaged.
It only manages so many folks. Yeah.
Right. And Doesn't Scale's a great one. So in the book, you highlight both Ted's optimism and Roy Kent's grit. How do you balance positivity with tough decision-making in business?
Well, I think Ted did it with humility. And Nick said, being vulnerable and authentic, right? So when you build that trust, Ted had his diamond dogs, and they are his biggest fans and his harshest critics. But in order for someone you have to give someone permission to be a critic of you in that way. You have to trust them, and they have to trust you that you can have the tough conversation because everybody wants the same thing. And so I think that's the trick in the balance of Ted and Roy, and why Ted needed a Roy.
Which is, and just to add on to that, I think one of the things we try to convey in the book, and we're on speaking circuits as well, is that there is no one correct way to lead. If everybody looks at Ted Lasso and the TV show and says, okay, there was one leader and it was Ted Lasso. Yes, he was the coach, but Roy Kent led through example. He led tough conversations that maybe Ted did not want to have. Coach Beard led through support. Sam led through decency and conviction. There were so many leaders in that show, and there were so many archetypes and different ways to lead that our fundamental belief is that everyone's a leader, and you should recognize that. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to act exactly like Ted Lasso, but you have to understand what your strengths are and where your areas of improvement are and how you address that. Do you address it through continuous learning? Do you address it through augmenting and supporting yourself, other types of leaders? To us, that's always been really important. I don't have the same attributes that Marnie has and vice versa, but together we make a really good team. And it's important for people to recognize that you can't be the be all end all to everything.
Yeah, I think the sports realm is an interesting place to look at leadership, because I also think that it's probably the prime example of micromanagement. You got like a football coach, the head coach, the general manager is making all the decisions about who they're going to draft. And yeah, I'm sure the coach gets an input, but ultimately it's that general manager's decision. And then they hand the coach this team, and the team doesn't do well, and suddenly it's the coach's fault. Nobody's a miracle worker. And one of the questions the local paper asked was, how do you propose we review and hold accountable teachers? And their question was, what do you think about using standardized testing? And I said, there's a problem with that. You get a teacher who has 20 kids this year, and they're all at the high end of their grade level. And then next year she gets all of them that are at the low end of the grade level. She's going to get two completely different standardized test results. And that's not her fault. That's the people that you're given. And I think it's the same with sports. And so it means you have to be a true leader when it comes to sports, because you have to convince your team members that they should follow what you say. But you also have to convince the upper management that you know what you're talking about, and maybe they should listen to you a little bit more than they're crazy. Like, I like to talk, I'm a big baseball fan, and I think this whole analytics stuff with baseball has just gone way too far. When you start saying, yeah, when you start saying, oh, they're at 100 pitches, we need to sit them down. Oh my gosh, I watched Nolan Ryan complete so many games over his career, all 9 innings, and probably pitched 200 pitches. He survived.
Zoom at 105, the guy's arm just falls off. They're like, yank. Sorry,
I know it.
You got to go.
So I think it's an interesting realm to look at leadership, because being a good leader as a head coach is a tough job, because you have both sides. You have the players, your coaching staff, and the upper management all breathing down your neck, expecting you to create miracles. And a lot of it's up to the decisions and what you were handed, especially a new coach that comes into the mix. And then they're like, here, this team's been 0-75. You're supposed to get a win now.
Yeah.
What?
Bill Parcells, who said, how do you expect me to cook the meal if I can't buy the groceries? You're absolutely right.
No, it's interesting. What were some of the key leadership strategies that you implemented to keep your team motivated and aligned during that growth period?
I think
No, you go, please.
one of the things is that before we even started the company, we knew how we were going to run the company in terms of core values. So we were really clear on our why, even though we weren't sure the what. Like, we knew that Raving Fans was going to be our number one priority. We were going to work on transparency, getting things done. So when you have clarity of who you are, it makes implementing the next part of it very easy. And one of the things that we talk about in the book is the notion of, we knew ourselves as a company, we knew ourselves as individuals. We created our own personal operating systems, and we had our employees develop their personal operating systems, including a communication guide. So we really wanted you to bring your whole self to the company, and we would help support that. So that's my take on it.
I will say the other thing, that it's 2024. We started in 2019. By the end of when we were about to exit from the company, ChatGPT was just starting to come along. Adam Grant says in Hidden Potential that we're in the midst of a character revolution. which is a really odd saying with all automation and AI and everything else being just prevalent everywhere, especially in technology. All of these skills that used to be unique when you and I were software developers years and years ago, Mike, are becoming commoditized, right? And it's the soft skills, it's your leadership skills that are really going to help you differentiate and stand out for the next 10, 20, 30 years, right? And that's something I think we did a really good job with when we were building the company, is we didn't just focus, although it was a technology company, it was a SaaS platform, right? We focused on the softer skills and development, continuous learning, how to communicate with each other, how to make sure that the culture actually reflected the core values of the company and that the people really embraced those core values in that culture. And I think that's often overlooked in the fast-paced start mindset of, hey, we just got to get things done. We got to get the best technology out there right away. We realized that wasn't the be-all, end-all in being successful as a company. It worked out for us.
I would love to plus one that because somebody just posted this on LinkedIn. So we exited last year, January 2023. So it's been a year and a half. And this morning on LinkedIn, somebody posted that one of the things that Lifecycle Insights, our company, did well was grow with the community. So we had a weekly community workshop where we would show new features and we would get their input and develop with them. And that was part of our personality. So that softer skill of developing a community helped grow the company. And years later, now they're still talking about how that meant something to them more than just what the product did for their company.
That's awesome. Two things to highlight there. You mentioned like a communication guide, having them write their communication guide. One of the things we do with our businesses is when we hire someone new, we ask them to tell us in writing how they like to be communicated with. We're all remote. So do you want me to send you a message on Slack? Do you want me to send you a text message? Do you want me to do both? Because I'm the leader. I'll adapt to whatever you want to make you happy, within reason, of course. But if you tell me I don't want you to communicate with me at all, that's going to be a problem. You do that. And it helps because people realize that they see how important they are to you, that you're actually asking them something as simple as, how would you like me to communicate with you? Most people are used to taking a job and being told how they're going to be communicated to. But I don't find that to be effective, especially with this remote world. And the second aspect of that is the whole idea of like how you manage a tech group. For me, I think results are way more important than how long they take you. And by that, if you tell me on today, which is a Wednesday, that you're going to have something done by a week from Friday, and you happen to have it done by this following Wednesday, and then you say to me, do you mind if I take tomorrow off? I need a mental health day. I got no problem with that. You got the job done, and that's what it's about getting the job done. It isn't necessarily about clocking 40 hours every week. And I used to get in trouble with my CEO because he'd say, where's Jay? And Jay was one of our software developers. And I said, I gave him the day off today. He was working really hard, long hours on this project. And they're salaried developers, by the way. He probably worked 60 hours last week. And so I figured I'd give him time off. And I said, no, because the next sprint doesn't get planned until this one's done. So he completed everything. He's good. I just think that's, and with what's going on with Gen Z these days, where they don't want to work 8 hours a day and they don't want to work 40 hours a week, I think if they choose their career path carefully, they'll be happy with what they get as long as they run into good leaders. I think being a good leader is knowing your team.
Yep.
And how to get the most out of them. And that is doing things like, you know what, I need Thursday off after having this long stretch of work. Cool, no problem. I'm not going to complain about that. You met your deadline. That's really what was the problem. So I think that those two things, highlighting those two things I felt was important because you made that point about the communication plan. And I thought right away, I was like, that's brilliant. Because you're making your employee from day one feel important to you. And you're right. You made a comment earlier about it's not about how many dollars you pay them. And I totally agree with you. I think if you find the right person and put them in the right job, they want to learn and grow. And if they see themselves learning and growing, a little bit less pay isn't going to kill them. And they realize that, oh, when I promote, I'm going to get paid more money. And I've learned these new skills. And I think one thing people need, all of you guys out there have to remember, your team at some point might leave you, but you're going to be someone they remember if you've helped them grow during the time that they were with you. And yeah, you're helping out another company get great talent, but that's how it works. People move on, and that's just what happens. So I encourage the leaders out there to actually lead. The Ted Lasso TV series, one of the things that from my memory that it focuses a lot on is emotional intelligence. So how important do you think emotional intelligence is in leadership, and how can leaders develop that all-important skill?
Okay, so it's mission critical. It's the top skill that leaders need to have. It's interesting. One of the things that is a highlight of Ted Lasso would be empathy, right? He was a very empathetic leader. And I saw a study recently that reading fiction is a way to develop empathy because you are able to put yourself outside your own thought process and watch someone else's fairly intimately through reading. So I think that is an interesting one. I also think recognizing and thinking about where your strengths and weaknesses are. So I'm a big reader. So one of the things that we do is we have a character assessment that lets you decide which leadership archetype you are. And then on our website and in the book, we have, if you're a Ted Lasso, here are some things that are your strengths and here are some of your weaknesses. And it aligns with emotional intelligence and some of those traits. And here are some books that might help you along the way. Nick, I know you would. I'm confident Nick agrees that emotional intelligence is at the top there.
I think to Marty's point, there are a number of books on the subject. We list them on our website. We think it's important. But I think being present and having intent with understanding different people's perspective to me is one of the most important things around being emotional intelligent. I'm going to bring up Adam McGran again. I love his Think Again, really trying to put yourself in somebody else's shoes, and he has all the science and the research behind why that matters. The most important skill he will learn and he needs to focus on learning is truly how to be more empathetic, how to be more vulnerable. All the emotional intelligence traits and characteristics will serve him much more so than the technical skills that he's learning at university, at college.
100%. That's one of the things my two youngest are, one just graduated college a year and a half ago, and then the other one is starting his third year. And what I told him when he went to university was he picked his top university and he managed to get in with a full scholarship. There was no reason to not take it. But one thing I told him was, with the way this school runs, make your connections while you're here with other people and learn how to interact with other people. And I said, and one big skill you need to learn, and it's part of this whole, like, how people hate to do group projects, is you have to learn how to motivate other people when you have absolutely no authority over them. If you can master that skill, you will be unstoppable in the workplace. And it's just something I believe in. But that kind of brings me to something else. So I like to ask some unusual questions. And so I'm at that point here. What is a TEDism or maybe a quirky leadership tactic that you've used in real life that had a surprising impact on your team? I love these questions because that's every other question. You ask the question, and people answer right away.
So I think even remotely, we did some minute to win it activities with the team. We played Mad Libs and did things to help folks team build in a different way, again, to bring the whole person to work. I'm goofy in general, so I think I bring that quirk in general. But I'll start with that.
I think one of my favorite lines from the show is never bring an umbrella to a brainstorm. And the whole notion of any idea is a good idea. And Marty and I, we did that as we were building the company. We did it as recently as 4 hours ago, where we challenge each other to come up with the most wildest, craziest idea. Hey, if we're going to be successful, this would be a great idea, but think 10 times beyond that. What is something that we never, ever would even think is feasible? What would be a positive outcome if we're planning for X, Y, and Z? So the whole notion, and that's a culture thing that we really implemented within our company, even before that, when we were in ed tech, that we use all the time. I think the TEDism of never bring an umbrella to a brainstorm is really in line with how we've acted as business partners for the last decade.
Nick, you're reminding me of the Twisted Tune rap that we did to get the product team's attention
Yeah.
on some bugs that they needed to fix.
So we're getting to the end of the time we have, but maybe let's wrap up with this question. What is the most outlandishly positive prediction that you have for the future of leadership in the tech or education industries?
Oh, Nick, can you go first?
You know, outlandishly, everybody talks about the whole notion that there's panic around the whole notion of artificial intelligence. And we've seen some good examples of this. I'm very optimistic about what artificial intelligence can do to not only make companies better in terms of their ability to scale and grow, but also in regards to the impact on life. I am very hopeful we will take artificial intelligence and take the good out of it and truly make technology drive new industries that impact ways that's for the betterment of people and mankind. That sounds corny and goofy and all that stuff. I understand that. But I think true leaders will embrace that. They will make businesses better places to work. They will adapt to the new generation and how they, just like you were talking about earlier, Mike, how they like to work, what they like to work on. I'm optimistic that it's technology that's going to take us there, but that is a lot of talking on a question that I didn't have a prepared response for.
My daughter just started teaching 4th grade this year, and I think it aligns with what Nick says, is that it will help us truly give each student what they need, because everyone doesn't need the same thing. I think technology will help level the playing field for a lot of folks, because technology can bring some of the world to them.
Kids love Polaroid pictures. It's developing right in front of my eyes.
And the whole notion of developing, when she prints out the pictures, I don't know that they've ever seen a pack of 24 before.
Yeah, and that's what's funny. Like nowadays, I always say, when I was living with my mom when I was much younger, like she would take photographs, she'd go take them in, she'd get them developed. Then she'd sit at the table and she'd go through, these are the really good ones, and these I'm going to put up somewhere. But nowadays, it almost feels like most of our pictures just end up in the box, because we take a picture with our camera phone and then we share it with a couple of people, and then we just never do anything with it, which is, to my way of thinking, really super sad. In probably 100 years from now, people are going to be like, photographs? It's going to be totally different. But guys, I really have enjoyed this conversation. You both bring a great energy to the show, and I really appreciate it. So why don't you let people know where they can connect with you if they will have more questions?
So easy place to find all things Lead It Like Lasso is at leaditlikelasso.com.
And also on LeadUp.
And
Our
also-
LinkedIn profiles are there as well.
Thanks so much for spending the time with me today.
Oh, thanks for having it.
It was great. Appreciate you.
Yeah, I appreciate you as well. Thanks everybody for watching another episode of Gaining the Technology Leadership Edge. We have new episodes every Wednesday, 8 a.m. Pacific time on YouTube, and it's also streamed to LinkedIn.